Okay, before I start the video, I just want to say, shout out to Bonafide Heat. Kevin, honestly, I'm so happy you had me on for this. I've been wanting to do a video like this for a long time, and it's very cool that I can finally be on the Bonafide Heat channel in a form like this. So, with that said, this video today, I'm going to give my contribution to talking about CM Punk. Alright, CM Punk, I'm wearing the shirt now. Generally speaking, he was my favorite wrestler from 2011 right through until about 2019, I dare say. Right from that whole window, CM Punk was my favorite, and I'll explain why in a moment. But essentially, you may have seen my video, you may know my story. If you don't, all good. Real quick synopsis. CM Punk was the first wrestler I ever saw on WWE TV. Alright, I turned on WWE Experience. CM Punk's reading a text message from his sister about Kevin Nash. So that was my first experience involving WWE, and it involved CM Punk. And from there, I grew, I guess, accustomed to CM Punk. I became a fan of CM Punk. What made me a fan was the sports entertainment side of things. Alright, the promos, it was cutting edge, it was against the grain. Alright, WWE in 2011, especially that time, very vanilla, very bland. You've just had The Miz as champion for like 6 months. This is like peak Super Cena era. This is the era where they announced the WrestleMania 28 main event involving Cena literally a year out. We're in this era, alright? So CM Punk comes along, he's edgy, he's anti-establishment, he's cutting edge, he's cutting really interesting promos, breaking the fourth wall there, John. No one else was doing it, so it made it cool. And it was just cool. It was awesome. 8-year-old me, 9-year-old me, 10-year-old me was like, this guy's really good. Alright? At that stage, I didn't care that he put on the best matches. I just cared about him because he was entertaining and he was fun to watch. Alright? He had entertaining segments, he had sports entertainment, good segments, and I really enjoyed it. So, CM Punk then leaves, 2014, and from then on, I mean, the Art of Wrestling interview happened, and he cut, or just did one of the biggest shoot interviews in wrestling history and called it not a shoot. That happened. And gradually, my interest in fandom and Punk, it kind of just, it skews away. As time went on, I was like, yep, I always am going to be a fan of Punk for what he did from 2011 through the end of 2013. I don't count that 1 month in 2014 where he wasn't trying and then left. I don't count that. That 2.5 year run, I watched CM Punk at his absolute apex. I'll never forget that. Thank you, Punk, for those memories. Thank you for those moments. But then it just became, Punk would either say something either a bit negative about WWE or wrestling in an interview randomly, or he'd, I don't know, have his UFC fights and get embarrassed in both of them. The one Mickey Gold was just, that was someone who was like a level 15 mixed martial artist, and Punk was a level 3 mixed martial artist. That gap's way too big. Punk got destroyed. Then the one against Mike Jackson, just a disaster of a fight. So that happens, and then you get to 2019, the StarCast interview happens. I'm thinking to myself, if Punk doesn't come back now, he's not going to come back. And lo and behold, he doesn't come back at all out 2019. I'm just like, okay, Punk's done.
So CM Punk has been away from wrestling since 2014. That means we waited over 7 years for the man to make his return when he made his return on AEW Rampage in the summer of 2021. Again, it was the summer of Punk. I felt like I was 15. I found myself strucken with this nostalgia. At first, I was like, I don't want to see CM Punk wrestle. I don't want to see CM Punk come back. And then I got sucked in by the hype, the nostalgia. Quite frankly, it was a combination of the two that brought me back into the CM Punk hype train. And now, I don't want to say that I'm fully off of the CM Punk hype train, but I just don't care. Like I did in August. I just don't care. Like, yeah, he had a good promo with MJF where he compared MJF to The Miz. Everybody was like, ooh, burn. With that being said, I'm just going to analyze CM Punk's return thus far. And I really want to answer the question, has it been worth the 7-year-long wait that he made us endure to finally see him embrace and become a wrestler again? Now, just to jump right into it, I'm going to say that for me, personally, as someone who was a diehard CM Punk fan from like give or take '07 to 2013, especially the years of 2011, 12, and 13, with more of a focus on 12 and 13, because I wasn't really watching during the original Summer of Punk. Like, I saw some of the stuff, I saw the pipe bomb, I saw the promos with Vince, but I wasn't watching every single week like I was in 2012 and 13. I just had more fond memories from those years, like his feud with Jericho, or the feud with The Rock leading up to the Royal Rumble in 2013, the feud with Taker going into WrestleMania 29. Like, I just remember those moments more fondly. Now, let's look at where Punk is today. Since he returned in AEW, he's done some good stuff. He's had some good matches. You know, he's wrestled a who's who in AEW. He's wrestled Darby Allin in his first match back at All Out, which was okay. He's wrestled Matt Sydal at a Dynamite that I was in attendance for live. He wrestled Eddie Kingston at Full Gear. I'm guessing he's going to wrestle MJF at Revolution, or maybe at like the New Year's show, the big winners show that AEW does. I don't know when that's going to happen, but he's going to wrestle MJF. And aside from that, he's wrestled guys, I believe he wrestled Danny Garcia. He's wrestled guys with lesser known profiles that are relatively unknown to even like some above average, like on the borderline of hardcore wrestling fans. We don't even really know who some of the guys are that Punk has wrestled on Rampage or on Dynamite. So I haven't been over thrilled or eluding with joy. I don't find myself like clamoring for the remote control to see CM Punk's matches or segments. If I catch it on YouTube, I catch it. I caught the MJF and Punk promo segment. It was like 20 minutes from a Dynamite a few weeks back. I went out of my way to catch that. I made sure I saw that one. I wanted to be able to experience that without seeing any spoilers. I'm not watching Dynamite every week. I'm not watching a lot of wrestling every week. So, really, like, I watched that promo and I'm just like, okay, CM Punk, this is a guy that we waited 7 years for. And now he's here making, like, cheesy references to WWE. Like, where is the great storytelling that we once saw from a guy like CM Punk? Back when he was cutting these promos on Vince, or he was being the voice of the voiceless, or the contract signing in Money in the Bank 2011. Where are those stories? Quite frankly, we're missing them. I miss them. But I think there's one thing that I learned about Punk in this stretch since his return. And this is really the key thing. This is really my closing statement. CM Punk, I don't think he ever was a great storyteller. I think he lucked in to a few great stories. I think for his career, CM Punk is an above average promo, but he cares more about being a wrestler. He cares more about what goes on in the middle of the ring. He cares more about having psychology. He cares more about not insulting people's intelligence with childlike stories, and I get that. But he's not the entertainer the level of Stone Cold Steve Austin is, or the level of The Rock. He's not that kind of guy. He's a wrestler first. And that's really what I've come to realize in his return. I don't think we're ever going to see great storytelling from CM Punk again. I don't think we're going to see good promos. We're going to see good promos here and there. But in terms of like a long-term story, like he told leading into Money in the Bank 2011, or like the story he told with Jericho going into WrestleMania 28, I don't think we're going to see that kind of over-the-top entertainment from Punk. Now, for me, I have to give his return like a thumbs in the middle. Like, it's fine. It's great to see him back. But I should have kept to my stance where I was like, I don't really need to see him back. Because I let myself get sucked back into the hype train just to be let down. When all I see from Punk are these subpar matches on Dynamite or on AEW Dark. I was expecting great, edgy, like can't miss TV every time he had a mic in his hand. But he's come out and he's like, oh, thank you fans. Do you remember me? It's great to be back. Like, we haven't really seen anything from the CM Punk that I remember. Like, he's just not really in his prime. Like, Edge comes back at 48 and he still is in his prime. He still wrestles the way he did 15 years ago. He still cuts promos the way he did 15 years ago. He even cuts better promos now. Tells better stories. And Punk, it seems like he's regressed in the 7 years that he's gone back. I'm hoping that I can chalk it up to ring rust. And maybe in a year from now, after Punk has had this great calendar year in 2022, I can sit back and say, wow, Punk proved me wrong. He told great stories with this guy. He had a great story with Sting. He had a great story with Jericho. Great story with Cody. And I hope that I can be proved wrong. All right, and let's kick it back to the elitist. for the second half of this video, and he's going to close it out for us. Thank you again for doing this, bro.
Part of this Bonafide Heat video I want to talk about, for CM Punk, in that time period in 2019, 2020, first half of 2021, what I'm thinking as a fan is if CM Punk comes back, I want to see him, if he goes to WWE, have one more big match with Cena, have one really big mainstream SummerSlam main event type match with Roman Reigns, or maybe a WrestleMania main event with Roman Reigns. I want to see CM Punk run it back with Jeff Hardy one more time. I want to see CM Punk have a program with Edge. I think that'd be pretty fun. Those are the kind of things I think about when it comes to CM Punk potentially making a return to WWE and having some really fun, interesting, hate-filled sports entertainment type segments. That's what I thought CM Punk would do if he ever did return to WWE. When it comes to AEW, I made this video about a year and a half ago. To me, I thought CM Punk, if he went to AEW, would do the following things. Have a big Punk as the babyface, MJF as the heel feud with MJF, alright? Punk vs MJF is like the big storyline for the AEW World title. I figured we'd get a Punk and Omega program. And I figured just generally we get Punk in some big-time feuds, big-time storylines. Now, this leads us in to the third part of this video. So the third part is my take as a guy who grew up idolizing Phil Brooks, idolizing CM Punk. My take as that guy, watching him being the face of AEW Rampage, pulling in a whopping 513,000 viewers every week. All right, CM Punk in that capacity. CM Punk as the guy who will give you a good match against Daniel Garcia. CM Punk, the guy who's going to have a good match against Matt Sydal. CM Punk, the guy who's going to have a good match against Anthony Bowens. Like, this is the CM Punk of today. The CM Punk of today, objectively, is a 43-year-old man who 10 years ago was cutting edge, edgy, making waves in the wrestling fraternity, doing things that we hadn't seen before, doing things that were, well, you know, once again, on the edge, new, fresh, entertaining. The anti-establishment thing we hadn't seen in WWE in a PG context really ever. All right, we'd seen in the Attitude Era when it was TV14 with Austin and what have you, but we didn't quite see that in the PG era. Punk was cutting edge, he was new. That's what we saw 10 years before. Now we see a CM Punk, a Phil Brooks, 43, 10 years past his prime, clearly aged. The gear's different most of the time. It's a different Phil Brooks. They're still the same Phil Brooks, which is a good thing, obviously. And this guy, he's no longer different, all right? CM Punk no longer totally stands out from absolutely everything. What magnetized me to Punk, as I said back in 2011, everyone was so vanilla, everyone was so cookie cutter. CM Punk was not cutting cookies, okay? Punk was making the dough for everyone, and everyone was just cutting cookies in there, if that makes sense. That's a really bad analogy. Anyway, basically what I'm trying to say, nowadays, CM Punk is the pro wrestler. And the pro wrestler, by definition, is a guy who will battle you out of honor, try and wrestle a really good match for the pure wrestling fans and the hardcore, I want to see mat-based or technical or whatever style of wrestling fans. CM Punk's now doing that. That's CM Punk. CM Punk is no longer the one guy in the herd who's going to be cutting edge and really entertaining with his promos. That was CM Punk 10 years ago, the all-out sports entertainer. That was what Punk was. Now CM Punk is the pro wrestler. All right, 10 years ago, as a result of the WWE system, Punk was sports entertainer 1, pro wrestler 2. Now, CM Punk is pro wrestler 1, sports entertainer 2. All right, CM Punk, what he did, his legacy, in my opinion, should be taking pro wrestling in the eyes of those watching and bringing it from way down here as opposed to sports entertainment. CM Punk did this. With a pipe bomb and with a few promos, he bridged the gap to there, all right? He closed that gap between sports entertainment and pro wrestling, shoot promos, burial promos, breaking the fourth wall. CM Punk stuff did that. He closed the gap, blurred the lines between the real fiction and reality. All of a sudden, because of Punk doing those promos, it became like this. And now we get an AEW where it's mainly pro wrestling, sports entertainment. it does depend on definition, but in summary, in closure, CM Punk is objectively a guy who is here to have a good match. He isn't the guy who's here to do something you've never seen before on the mic or really break new ground anymore. That's what he was 10 years ago in WWE. That's what magnetized me to him. Now CM Punk is good pro wrestler with a really, really good catalog of matches and a really good catalog of entertainment. All right. CM Punk's thing was always the voice of the voiceless. All right. The voiceless is the 750,000 diehard AEW fans. Now, AEW fans, thanks to Tony Khan and the Khan family's wallet, thanks to the Elite, now the voiceless have a platform. The voiceless have a voice, and now CM Punk is just standing behind that megaphone, accompanied by everyone who's there with the megaphone as well. So that's the end of the video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks once again to Kevin for having me on. Hopefully you guys can make something out of this babble. Hopefully Kevin can edit this up to make it so that one part, my story of Punk, makes sense. The second part and the third part makes sense as well. So thanks for watching, guys. And yeah, without further ado, peace.